announcing the iPhones, and basically, that they've had the specs basically ironed out for a while. And when he was on stage presenting it, he was like, and they're coming in two sizes. He goes, and in case you don't know what they are, he put them up, and he's basically just acknowledging that yeah, there's been rumors, and they were right the whole time.
All right.
So I thought it was kind of
Funny.
cool. Anyways,
It's kind of funny.
you
I
ready to
think
go?
we're ready.
I think
Yeah.
we're ready. Yeah. All right. So, hello, anybody that's out there watching, whether it's live or whether you're watching it down the road. Um, I am Michael Robertson Jr. I am an author. I've written 3 novels, 2 of which I have here with me. Rough Draft, which is a horror thriller, and Regret, which I wrote under the pen name Dan Dawkins. More of a psychological suspense, I guess you'd call it. And then my 3rd novel, which came out a couple months ago, is called Transit. I don't have a paperback of that one to show you, sorry. But that is another thriller. And that's all available now. And what we're going to do today is we're going to have a little bit of a conversation artist to artist. I've got a guest with me, my good friend, Jason Collins. We've known each other for a long time, and I got into writing, and he got into the creative arts in terms of photography and graphic design, and is doing really well with that. Him and his wife own a very successful photography business based in Roanoke, Virginia. Doing really well, really exciting, does a lot of good quality work. He's been kind enough to do almost every single cover for my books, my short stories. He's helped me do some stuff with my web design. He's very talented, and he's been really gracious to help me out. So what I thought we'd do today is Jason and I would sit down and just talk about both of our art forms and kind of go back and forth about how we do what we do, what inspires us, creativity, and workflow, and just kind of see what happens. Should be fun. So, Jason, want to say hey?
Hey everybody. Thanks for having me and doing this. This is cool. I think we should do more.
Well, I think we will down the road. At least for me, anyway. I'm planning on trying to get some other authors on here and talk to them, and so just anybody that wants to sit down and talk about whatever. I think it's a cool medium to kind of just chat, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are interested to see what some people might have to say about things. So
Yeah, it's much more personal, rather than like an article interview. I think those are very impersonal because it's all very you're just text you're reading, But these are I really like watching video interviews, whether it be for anything. So I think these are cool.
All right. Well, we're not going to waste any more time. Let's just go ahead and get into it. Jason, I'll start. I'll ask you a question, and we'll go back and forth. We'll kind of ping pong it and see where we end up. Is that cool with you?
Yes.
All right. So my first question for you is, like I said before, you and I grew up together, and I remember when we were young, you were pretty good with drawing, sketching, and stuff like that. You could sit there in 5 minutes and just make little sketches that were really good. And so I've always kind of known, whether I realized it or not, that you were very artistic when it came to visuals. So I don't remember anything in between those elementary school years and then I guess about the time we got out of college where you really started getting in to photography and more of the graphic design stuff. So I guess what is it about photography that ultimately grabbed you and made you so passionate to the point that you're making a living at it now?
Um, well, I don't know. Like you said, I've always been into art, and it was my grandma that really helped me because she was also a photographer. I don't think you knew that, but she was a photographer um, back in Hawaii. She was a journalist. So she did a lot of that photography, and she had some cameras, and then she also would buy me lots and lots of disposable cameras. And she would always talk about how to take a photo, composition and things like that. And then she also taught me how to draw. So a lot of it, I would have to thank her. Um, I didn't do a whole lot in like high school and college, like you said. And then when I met Kristen, is my wife. She was doing digital. She had just gotten into digital photography, And so um, she wanted to take a class. She wanted to go audit a class at Virginia Western. So I thought it would be cool to do it with her. And it just kind of happened that I was pretty good at it, and it just picked it right up. I really liked it. I liked creating these cool pictures. Um, it just, I guess it lit a fire under me again for art, because I stopped drawing altogether. And when the photography came about, it was a lot of fun, and I had all these ideas and cool things that I wanted to do, and I was able to do them, and people liked them, and so it just worked out.
Cool. Yeah, it's. I remember you taking the class, and I remember you kind of getting into it after that, and it was funny because over the years I saw you kind of just climb that hill and progress. You went from, hey, this is really neat to, hey, this is how this works on a camera, and then 6 months later you're showing me stuff, and I'm like, holy shit, that's really good. So it was fun to see that happen.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and you mentioned the like how this works. That's another thing that really got me into the, or I guess it's something that I really love about digital photography is that a lot of it is very technical, and so both you and I love tech, and so it was an easy transition from our regular careers too.
Got it. All right, so hit me up. What you got for me? Your turn.
Um, well, I think everybody wants to know about your latest work, Transit. Did you want to talk a little bit about that and any specials that you got going on, or
Uh,
things that or what you tried something different with Transit, right?
I did, yeah. Actually, that's a good point. Glad you brought that up. I'd kind of forgotten about that. With Transit, yeah, Transit is my third full length novel, and I have had a couple of short stories. Well, that's a lie. I've had one short story in between my last novel and this one. So it was approaching this one. I wanted to do something a little differently, and what really ultimately inspired it was, as anybody that's at all up to date with modern day pop culture knows, television is getting really really big again. There are TV shows, especially with dramas, that are far superior than anything you're going to see in the theater. And I think just episodic dramas and are really having the ability to tell a story with greater length because they have, instead of 2 hours, 2.5 hours to squeeze in a really engaging story, they're getting to do 10 1 hour episodes. I mean, you look at Game of Thrones, you look at what Breaking Bad did for 5 seasons. There's just some phenomenal television out there, and you can see because they're pulling in big time actors that are now wanting to do TV versus a ton of movies. So I thought about that and how cool it was and how it kind of can maybe translate, into writing. And I'm not going to take credit for the idea. I've seen some other people that have been doing it. Ted Decker, who's a very popular Christian fiction writer, New York Times bestseller, he's been doing it a lot with ebooks. And so ultimately, what I decided to do was I was going to write a novel, but in my head, as I approached it, as I was writing it, I was going to write it as episodes. So basically, it allowed me to keep the pace really high. So I sat down at the beginning and I wrote about 50 pages, and it was all very high octane, very suspenseful. And I got to what I guess you call it a cliffhanger, and I said, okay, there's one episode, and I packaged it and I published it, and there's episode one. And then I did it for episodes 2 through 4. So basically, ultimately, what I did was I wrote 4 very suspenseful, very pedal to the metal chapters that ultimately create one novel, and I published them individually over the course of about a month. And then once they all went out, then I ultimately published it as one full-length novel, and it had some decent reception. Part one is free and always will be free as long as I have any type of control over it, so people can go get those first 50 pages and read it, and hopefully they'll like it. I don't know how you can get to the end of the 50 pages and not want to know what happens next. So then you can either go get the rest or get the novel. It's up to you. But it was a fun way to do it, and I think there's some readers that have had some fun with it too.
Yeah, I love the book. I mean, so it was, and I thought it was a really really interesting and ultimately great idea to do it in the episodes, and how you published it, from week to week too, was really cool. it worked out well, I think, for you. I hope it did. Um, do you plan to do another one like that?
I think it depends on the story. I'd like to. Some of my stuff, like with regret, regret was more of a psychological suspense, like I was saying earlier, and so it's more of a slow build than a really fast-paced story. And I think with these episodes, you need the fast-paced. You need the readers to be sucked in from the beginning and just held on to the entire time. You don't have the opportunity to let them slip away for anything. So ultimately, it would depend on the story, but I'm definitely not opposed to it. If Transit continues to do well, then it's obviously proven to be something that will be useful in the future.
Hmm. And I think that segues good into my next question for you, which was inspiration. Um, I we've talked about it before lots of times how we find it interesting how other like big name authors get their ideas for their stories, and I think it's the same. I think it's the same for anything. And I've always found it interesting how you get your inspiration, just because we grew up together, and we're very close. But I still enjoy hearing how you think and where you get your ideas from. Um, so, like overall, like what inspires you? Where do you get your inspiration from? Is it from other stories? Is it from movies? Is it from sitting outside watching the wind? Where do you get ideas from?
Well, it's hard to answer, but ultimately, it sounds really cliche and really corny to say this, but really everything. I think most anybody would agree that there's basically zero unique art left to be created to a certain degree. Everything is influenced by something else. So yeah, there could be something I see on TV. It could be something I see in a movie that I hold on to. Not necessarily a plot, but anything, a scene, a setting, a person that's wearing something. That could become something that I use down the road. And as far as overall plot ideas go, um, there's there's also no denying that people that are creative artistically, I think that they ultimately think toward their craft. I'm assuming I'm going to assume that from a photography perspective, you probably see the world through your eyes from behind a camera lens a lot of the time. You see things and you go, man, if I got over there and I set that up and had this light, that would be gorgeous. It's kind of the way I think. And some people might say that I'm weird or have a twisted, sick imagination, and they'd be right. They would definitely be correct. I see things, and I did an interview with another young lady author a few months ago for her blog, and she basically wanted to know my take on horror and how I came up with my idea. It's a very similar question, and I basically just said I'll ultimately ask what if. And a lot of times my what ifs are very vulgar and very scary and very bad for whoever's going through the what if. I see little things that happen, and then I go, man, if that happened this way, that person's in trouble, and that's going to be bad news. And I can get really twisted with that. With Transit, which was the novel we were just talking about, it's a thriller straight up, but it's a pretty horrific thriller in terms of some of the brutality. But I got the idea. The book is based on a group of friends, six friends, mid 20 something people, both male and female. They come back from a trip abroad, and they fly into the airport very late in the evening. It's raining, and they call the shuttle to come take them back to the hotel parking lot to get their car so they can go home. The shuttle arrives. They all board. They're grumpy, they're tired, and turns out this is not the shuttle that's taking them to their hotel. This is somebody who's abducting them, and they don't know where they're going, and bad things happen after that. And I got the idea for that because something very similar happened to me and my wife. We went on a trip abroad last fall. We came back. It was probably 9:30. By the time we got out of the airport, it was cold. It was raining. We get to the shuttle stops, and there's nobody there but us. We call the shuttle to come pick us up. We get on, it's taking us back to our hotel, and as I'm sitting there in the back of this van, just she and I, with this guy that we have no idea who it is, supposedly taking us back to our hotel, I just thought to myself, I was like, man, what if this guy didn't take us to our hotel? how do we know? We don't know this guy. We just trusted that he's the person he's supposed to be. And I just never let that idea go until I started writing the book.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how I think it's interesting how some people would judge somebody that goes to those thoughts or writes these types of things or comes up with these stories. But ultimately, I think everybody has it in them. I think everybody has those dark thoughts. I think there are some people that A, allow themselves to dive deeper into those thoughts, and B, are more comfortable with them. And you're more comfortable with them. I'm more comfortable with them. People that love horror stories, horror movies, thrillers. Not that they're comfortable, but they understand that it's a part of them, and I think they can deal with it. You just happen to be really good at putting it, pen to paper and putting these stories out to enjoy. But like, my wife hates horror. She can't watch them. She lets it get into her, and it'll affect her for weeks, in a bad way. So she just can't watch those things. So it's I think everybody has that ability, but I think you definitely allow yourself to dive deeper into it than most people allow themselves to.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right with that. And you talk about people that can go to those places or don't like to go to those places. You see that line drawn in the sand with any form of art, like you were just saying. And I mean, you can even look at comedy. You can look at some of the current comedians working. Look at Louis C.K. He's arguably one of the most successful comedian working right now, and there are people that flat out hate him because he can be so dirty and so graphic to the point that it turns people off. And he's been, he's a really intelligent guy. If you read some of his interviews that he's done, he's very well spoken. He knows what's going on in the world, and his explanation is basically, I'm saying the things that nobody else wants to say, but they're all thinking.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
he admits that he might take him a little further, but that's just for the sake of his own, artistic ability. But
Right, and
there's an honesty that people, I think, sometimes overlook, and sometimes they criticize.
and you talk about another medium, and comedy is one, and I immediately went to Joan Rivers. She just passed away, but she had a very specific way of looking at comedy, and she could make anything funny, or she could at least make a joke about it. And I was watching a lot of her tribute videos, and one of them was when she was younger, and her husband had just committed suicide, and uh, there was an audience member asked, what is too far for you? And she basically said nothing. She said, because if I can't talk about it, then I can't do my job. So it's like she can take comedy and make a joke with anything. So I get it takes different people to be able to do it.
I agree. It definitely takes certain people to be able to do it, and again, you have to realize in any art form, art is so subjective that you will never please everybody,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't be an artist of any way, shape, or form if you can't accept that and have a little bit of tough skin, because people they'll come at you. I don't really know what it's like in the photography world, but me as a writer, I've had reviews on some of my work criticizing character decisions. I get 1-star reviews on Amazon because they really hate the character, and I'm like, yes, I got to that person. That's somebody that I pissed off because they don't like something that I wrote in a way because it affected them. I've had people that in my book Regret. This isn't really a spoiler by any means, but there's a obese woman who's one of the semi-main characters in Regret, and I poke fun at her a little bit because she eats a lot of junk food and she's big and she has a hard time moving around. And I got a negative review one time that was like, the author obviously hates and has a prejudice against large people or obese people. And I'm like, shut up, you asshole! No, I don't. It's fiction. I wrote it because it's a joke in a book. I don't. You have to be able to understand that authors write stuff that's honest, not necessarily their own point of views. And people that have a hard time with that, they just, you have to ignore them.
Right. And so you're talking about regret, and there was something that I'm sure we've talked about it, but I actually can't recall right now. what inspired regret?
Oh man, Regret was a mess. Regret was one of the weirdest books that I've ever written, and to
It
the
was
point,
also one of your darkest.
it is very dark. It's a guy, to make it short, he ultimately he loses a lot very early in the book. Basically his entire life collapses around him, and then he slowly loses his mind and goes on a killing spree, and I'll leave it at that. But the funny thing about Regret was it was one of the most challenging, it probably is the most challenging book that I've written, because I started out with a very clear cut idea. I got an idea for a story, and I was like, man, I'm going to write that. And I started writing the book, and I got maybe 3 chapters into it, and it completely changed. I got to a certain point, and I know it sounds weird when authors say their characters did something that they didn't expect. It happened to me. I wrote something, and I was like, well, that works a lot better than the way I was going with it before. And then I started building off of that. So the book made a left turn where I thought I was going to make a right very early on. I got nearly 3/4 of the way finished with it, and I said, okay, now I have no idea what's going to happen next. And I probably sat on it for a month before I figured it out. So I really have no idea what inspired Regret. It was a small seed of an idea that I started one book and ended up writing something completely different.
Okay. All right.
Well,
So,
I think it's my turn to ask you a question, because we've basically just rambled for probably 15 minutes off of the one question you asked me.
okay.
So let's see, which one do I want to ask you? I have them down here in case you guys can't realize that I'm staring at my desk. Um, so when you first got into photography, I remember you were doing a lot of gorgeous like landscapes and nature and just, I don't know if still life is the right term, but not people. Let's put it that way. You had a lot of really awesome pictures. You were experimenting with a lot of HDR. I remember you were going out in the country and into the city and taking beautiful pictures of buildings. I mean, it was really awesome stuff. And then one day, it was just all of a sudden you started taking pictures of people, and you got into portraits, and now ultimately you've built your entire business around it, and are doing really well. So I kind of want to know what led to the transition. How did you end up ultimately on portraits?
uh, that's a really good question, and I really don't have a great answer for it, other than I was doing a lot of landscape, and I got bored with it. Mostly because I wasn't really happy with it. I just don't think I was doing really good work. I got really bored with it. I just hated seeing what I was taking pictures of, um, and it just wasn't exciting. And then I got into like still life, and I started a project is really what uh, I don't know. It was a catalyst to really getting serious about it. And it was that 365 project where I was supposed to take a picture every single day for 365 days. And I started on Jan 1 of whatever year, I forget now, but that was when I really started experimenting with strobes. And thinking about taking strobe and flash photography of people terrified the shit out of me. I didn't want to take pictures of people because I didn't want people to be upset with it because their pictures were so terrible, you know what I mean? And so that's why I started doing still life stuff. And because, who cares if you make an apple look terrible. And I started for every single one picture that, people would see for that day, I probably took 200 shots. And it was just a matter of experimenting. And then once I got really bored with that was when I thought I would start to do portraits, because it still really scared me, but that excited me. And everybody's different. Faces are fascinating. I think everybody's face needs to be lit a certain way to be flattering, and that's really what started to excite me. It was like taking pictures of people and making them look the best that they can. And I honestly, once I started, 6 months, a year, 2 years, I still loved every single portrait session that I was doing. And it was about that time that I really realized that I love to take portraits and pictures of people. So
Is it hard to make some people look good?
Well, it's really, and I know it's a joke, but it is because some people are just they're not photogenic. It's not that they're not pretty; they're just not photogenic, and it could be for many reasons. But ultimately, when you see a picture of somebody that's not great or grand, it's usually because they're not comfortable in front of the camera. Um, so a lot of my job as a portrait photographer now is to get people to be comfortable in front of my camera and give me a genuine smile. As soon as I get a genuine smile from them, not a fake smile, not a I'm an awkward poser, I want you to stop thinking about posing. I want you to stop thinking that I'm taking your picture. I want us just to be hanging out. I want us to joke around, and I want to capture a moment of you. And ultimately, as soon as I can do that, the rest of the session goes swimmingly well, and they love their pictures. Um, so it's about capturing the real person because nobody likes a fake smile on themselves. So now that I'm to the point where I'm pretty technically sound, so I don't have to worry about getting all those parts right. Now a lot of my job is connecting with my clients, connecting with the person. It's about the person, not the photograph anymore. So
I believe that it's again because I've known you for so long. We grew up together, and I've seen you basically through every phase of your life, and we're adults now, and I've seen you work with some of your clients. Well, my family included, when you came down and shot some of our pictures last year, and it is so much fun to watch you interact with people and like you were just saying. I mean, that was a brilliant answer, by the way. I had no. I mean, I was like just hanging on that answer myself. Um, Seeing you make people comfortable because you do that really well, especially with children, and I think that is probably what is the coolest to watch is you get a kid who's standing there and maybe not be wanting to focus or just being unhappy, and you can just kind of get into them and make them happy. Got people, seriously, if you're anywhere near Roanoke, Virginia, and need shots of your kids or family, whatever, call this guy up. It's a lot of fun to watch, and I think you'll be pretty happy with what he ends up with.
I think I connect good with kids because I'm ultimately just really goofy. I have a hard time connecting with adults more actually.
Yes, that is very true. You're kind of a nerd. Um, okay, so am I up? You asking me now, I think.
I think I'm gonna ask you a question,
Oh,
and again, that was an excellent segue into my next question. You're talking about your family, and this is something that I think a lot of people would find interesting. I still find interesting thinking about you, thinking about myself. Uh, both you and I, we have careers. Okay, we have technical careers. Yours is a little more than mine, but um, we have full-fledged careers, and we also have families, and we are 100% dedicated to both of those. Um, and here we are, still able to do something that we love to do. You writing books, me running my photography business, um, and we make good money at it. We are making a career out of doing something that we love. So we have our main career, and then we have our side career, and then we have our family, and then we have ourselves to think about too, health-wise and things like that. How in the world do we fit it all into one day and stay sane with being able to give appropriate attention to everything?
oh, I didn't know that we were sane. First of all, are you sane? I'm not. I am well beyond sane at this point. Um, no, that's a great question, and honestly, it is probably the hardest part about what I do. Um, I can get idea. I mean, getting a new idea that's worth writing is hard. Taking that idea and actually beginning to make a full length piece of work out of it is harder. But for me right now, and I think probably for anybody that wants to succeed in the arts, is you know yes, we both. You like taking pictures. I love to write. There are some days where it makes me want to jump out of a window, but ultimately, I mean, it's a ton of fun. I love telling stories. I love having people read them. But it don't be mistaken, it's work. It is a job, and the people that can't treat it like a job and understand how much effort needs to go into it are the people I think that ultimately will either give up or not never reach the level that they want to give at. You and I are both pretty ambitious people and always have been, partly I think because we've always pushed each other a little bit. Um, but I've seen Stephen King has a quote, and I don't know if it's actually his or if he just likes to quote it and it was somebody else's originally. But I've heard him and his son both say it, and that's amateurs sit around and wait for inspiration while the rest of us just get to work. And that's ultimately how I approach it. Yes, family comes first, and yes, we both have careers. I work a 9 to 5 job, and but at the end of the day, even when I'm exhausted or I'd rather go back here and play some PlayStation or watch a movie or something. I know that I'm never going to succeed if I don't at least take a little bit of time out of my day to work on what I'm trying to succeed at, and that can be whether I'm going to write 50 words or 500 words, or if I really get in the flow and the coffee's brewing and I get 5 pages out, and I'm not. You have to find the time. You have to prioritize. You have to put your family first. You have to do, what's required of you. But if you don't make the time, it'll never happen. And if it never happens, how can you succeed? And that's really the way you have to approach it. It's exhausting. It's hard work. There are literally days where I hate it, and sometimes I go, why am I even bothering with this? But then I remember the reward that I get from it. I remember, how fun it is to do this when the words are really flowing. And then I also remember how freaking crazy I am to the point that I couldn't really stop it if I wanted to, because it's just the way my brain works now. I walk around, I see things, I go, oh, I could use that. Well, if there's nothing to use it on, what am I going to do? It's
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that was a great answer. And you talked about, you wanting to go back there and play your PlayStation. Um, Doing what we do or doing what you do, in your mind, and keep in mind that your answer might differ from other people because but the question is what gets sacrificed? What has gotten sacrificed in your career of writing? What fat have you trimmed? What do you not do anymore that you might be doing or that you want to do? Now, keep in mind, your sacrifice is what you consider, when you might not consider a sacrifice, other people might. And just an example, in my situation, I don't watch TV anymore. I don't watch it at all. Um, Now, I have some shows that if I get some time, I'll go out and I'll get it on iTunes. I'll watch the season, and that'll be about the extent of it. But I don't just sit down and watch TV in the evenings. We don't do that. So what about you? Like, what do you think you've sacrificed, or maybe in the beginning of your career, what maybe got sacrificed that shouldn't have got sacrificed, or things like that?
well, ultimately for me, I mean, kind of like what I said, you and I, you said it earlier, we're both tech centric people. We both kind of like to geek out. We both work in IT, not when we're not doing photography and writing. Video games is definitely one of the things I've sacrificed. I enjoy playing video games, and it's something that I've had to cut out. It's why it takes me, 3 months to beat a game now when it might have used to taken me, 2 weeks, whatever, because I had time to do it. But um, that's probably, really about it. I mean, my wife and I would probably watch more TV, if we had more free time, but, we stay busy, whether it's with the kids, and playing sports and, finally getting home and realizing that, okay, I need to go write and she's got to go, keep this going. It's really the stuff that I've had to sacrifice ultimately isn't anything that, I can't live without. Now you have to have days where you have to put everything else aside. Like there are days where I go, I'm not touching the keyboard. I'm going to sit here for 2 hours. I'm going to play this game, or, we're going to go binge watch House of Cards, she and I, because need to catch up, something like that. You have to have those days, otherwise you will go crazy because, life's not all about work. It's about being able to enjoy life and the people around you at the same time. But,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, it, recreational stuff, I guess, is my ultimate answer. There are things that I'd like to do sometimes that I don't get to do enough of, and that's probably the case for anybody that works hard at something that they're passionate about.
Well, it's a good answer because I mean, in the beginning of mine, when I first started the career, I feel like I did a poor job of managing my time, and ultimately, my family suffered. You know, my family time, and it was something that it was hard to realize, and once I did, I had to make adjustments, and things are much better now. And but you know, it was just one of those things where it's like it's another one of those things that people don't realize. But we have careers, we have a family, but we also don't have any free time, and because that free time is taken up with our careers or with our side careers. But honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Like you said, if I wasn't doing this, I'd still be taking pictures. I'd still be doing. I'd probably be able to do much more personal projects, but I'd still be doing it, and I'd still be doing what I love. Um, and it's taken me a long time to get into, the business aspect of photography, because what I do is a little different than what you do. As in, I actually have a business to run, um, and so that's taken some time to get a hold of, but. Um, it's just one of those things. What do they call it? An entrepreneurial spirit. Just kind of always looking for different stuff to do. And um, another thing that I've sacrificed, and I don't know if you have or not, but sleep. I've sacrificed lots and lots of hours of sleep. Um, and I'm sure you remember. You get cold sweats when you think about it. But our most recent failed project was the embroidery website. Um, and that took so much of my time. But it was just one of those things. I was like, God, I hated losing my sleep. I was so tired, but I loved the product. I loved what we were doing, and I so badly wanted it to succeed and thrive, and it just didn't. But you had to cut those corners when you could, and sleep was one of those things.
Sure. You're exactly right. And that project failed and the next one might fail, but the third one, it might not. That might be the one. That's I think what you talk about, the entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, you have to if you're not willing to fail, then why bother?
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna ask you the question now. We got
Hmm.
I guess about 19 minutes left. I scheduled this for an hour, so I don't really want to go over that
Okay.
because first of all, nobody else is going to watch us for more than an hour, if they've even made it this far.
Yeah.
Um, so we've talked a little bit about inspiration and why we do the things that we do and stuff like that. So I've been I've been publishing and selling my work for almost 4 years now. It's maybe like three and a half, something like that. You've been in photography a little longer than that, I think. I don't know the exact years, but still, in the grand scheme of things, we've both been doing this for less than 10 years total. So I think we've reached a point now where we've gone from knowing very little about our craft, starting fresh, getting to this point. So now my question is, what do you do to continue to get better and make yourself better and continue to know that you're honing your craft?
I that's a good question, and I think it ultimately comes down to me realizing that my work needs work. Um, I'm pretty good, but I'm not great. Some people might think my work's great, and that's fine. But it, it, I constantly look at my own work and I critique the shit out of it. Um, I'll go back to sessions that I've done 2, 3 weeks ago, and with the sole purpose of finding things that are wrong with it. Um, I I never turn down any kind of free tutorial that's on like a website or something. They post new tutorials and stuff, whether it's something just ridiculously stupid or basic, whether it be photography or Photoshop or anything like that. I'll watch it, and one out of every 5 videos, I will learn something new that's pretty interesting, that I didn't know I knew. And it's those moments where you're like, "God, I just really need to keep watching these videos. I need to keep reading new things. I need to keep trying new things." And that's my second part is I'm trying new things all the time. Um, whether it be different styles of portraiture photography, whether it's different lighting techniques, whether it's different modifiers, different locations, um, forcing myself to shoot an entire session with just one lens and still get as many different looks as I can, challenging yourself, just constantly challenging yourself. That's what I do.
That's that's a good answer. You got kind of technical there, shooting everything through one lens and all kinds of stuff. You do that a lot actually sometimes when you talk about photography. You start rambling off terms and acronyms that you seem to be really excited about, and I have no idea what they mean or stand for. But ultimately, I guess it's working for you, whatever it is. So I'm gonna also answer that question because I think I'm gonna answer it because it's a good question that I know whenever I read or listen to or watch interviews with other authors, it's the question that I always look forward to hearing what they're going to say. So with writing, this is the answer that I hear so much, and it's funny because I think ultimately it's the answer that wannabe writers, aspiring authors, people like me never want to hear. They want something better than what the best answer actually is, because just like everybody wants to get rich quick, solution, um, they don't exist. And so really how I get better is the same answer that I would give if somebody said, what advice do you have for somebody starting and trying to do this? And that's with the craft of writing. And I'm by no means professional. I mean, I've had marginal success, enough to make me happy and want to keep doing this. Have a small readership. Um, there's absolutely no way to become a better writer than you reading a lot and writing a lot. And that's it. You have to read everything you can. I mean, Jason, you've known me for a long time. I very rarely do you see me without a book that I'm currently reading.
I've never
Um,
seen you without a stack of books in your to do in your to read list. I mean, you always have a ton of stuff backed up.
right. So you need to read a lot because just like we were saying way back in the beginning of this, art is always influenced by other art. So you have to read to see what works, to see all these other authors' voices and their characters and the way that they work their stories. And ultimately, what you're doing is, whether you realize it or not, is that you're creating a voice of your own. That you are going to basically take all these pieces and maybe morph into something that is unique and yours. Then you'll use that for your writing. And just like anything else, practice makes perfect. If you're not constantly writing, you're never going to be able to hone that craft. You're never going to be able to realize what works, what doesn't. You're never going to be able to get your sentences to flow in a way that somebody might actually want to read. And that's really the best answer you can give, but it's the one everybody hates because ultimately what I said you have to work.
Hmm.
You have to just shut up and you have to get to work.
Hmm.
And I even hate that sometimes because sometimes when I get frustrated or I have a bad month with what my copies are doing, out on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. I'm just like, man, this, not a good month this, today or whatever. Um, I just have to keep writing. You just have to keep pushing, and you only fail when you stop trying. So
Yep, right. And that brought up another question that I want to ask you. Uh, it's two questions. What advice would you give yourself from 5 years ago? And well, let's just start with that. Let's start with that one.
I
If you if
think
you, if you had to go back and talk to yourself.
work harder for sure. Um, yeah, that's the only thing I would ever say to myself is to work harder at it because I wrote a novel that I never published. It was kind of like my can I do this story. I did it. It's locked away on my computer somewhere. I should probably just delete it. And then I wrote Regret. And Regret, when I published it, it was out for about 3 months, and then it started to sell really, really well. I mean, I was like in the top 300 overall on Amazon for a couple months. You know, it did well. And I put out a collection of short stories following it a month or so, and when Regret was selling well, the collection of short stories was selling well, and I was riding that high, and I made the worst mistake that I could have done. I got lazy, I got complacent, and I didn't write anything for almost a year. And you know what happened is the momentum died down, and by the time that I put out another story, it was really hard to get the momentum back up, and it remains a struggle today to keep any type of momentum because self-publishing has gotten so big and there's so many talented people out there and so many people putting out new work constantly that it's dog eat dog. You got to fight. You got to get yourself out there. And you know, I work hard now. I have a really good work ethic now. I mean, I'm sure it could still be better, but I do what I can with the time that I have. And I really wish that I would have worked harder then, knowing what I know now, and not had that lull, that slack off period where who knows, I could have put out, you know, 2 more books in that time period. I don't know, and I missed that opportunity. And it's time I'll never get back.
Right, right. But you realize that now, so that's good.
Well, what about you? Let's end on this one. As far as the questions go, what advice would you give younger Jason when he walked into that classroom at Virginia Western Community College and said, "Man, what's this all about?"
It had probably been be more confident, I think is what it would have been. Like I said earlier, I was terrified of taking portraits, pictures of people. I was terrified. I hated it. Yeah, I was so scared of that, and it ultimately it was a crutch for a long time. And those couple of years could have been, like you said, they could have been years where I was learning and getting better at portraiture. I didn't know I'd be any good at it, and if it ultimately, if I'd never tried it, I wouldn't have realized it. But I wish I had tried it a lot earlier in my career. So it'd probably been just be more confident, not to be confused with cocky or arrogant, but just be confident. That probably be what it was.
Confident yet humble.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we know some people that are cocky and
yeah,
it's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are approaching our hour mark at like 8 minutes left.
Yeah. Now, do you have anything that you want to pitch? I mean, as far as new stuff coming out, do you want to give a teaser of something that you're working on?
Yeah, I'll give a little hint, I guess. Nothing major. I'm currently like 3,000 words into a short story that I'm writing. I think it's going to be a short story. I don't think it's going to be a novel. I don't think I can make it a full-length novel. I started writing as a short story. It's probably what it'll end up being. But ultimately, there's a businessman traveling up the East Coast. He's traveling from Florida up to New Jersey, and it's a little after midnight one night. He stops in at a gas station to get some coffee, gets back in his car, and he has a voicemail from an unknown caller who is a female who obviously knows him, has obviously been intimate with him very recently, expresses her love for him, and says she can't wait to see him again. And the voicemail ends, and he has absolutely no idea who she is. He hasn't been with a woman in nearly 2 years. So he hangs up, and he's just completely confused. And as he starts to drive, he starts getting more of these voicemails, and they become more and more intense as things start happening to this woman, and she's pleading for him to come help her. And he has no idea who she is. So I'm working on that. I'm not really sure when it'll be out, but it's a work in progress. And then after that, I'm going to start probably the next novel. I have two ideas that I want to write for that, and I don't know which one I'm going to work on yet, so I'm not going to say anything.
All right.
Um, and then as far as pitching anything next week on Friday to celebrate the launch of the new iPhones, that's not really why I'm doing it. It happened to be the date. But the latest novel, Transit, will be on sale for 99 cents on Amazon for Friday and Saturday.
Nice. That's the whole collection?
Yes, that's the full length, all four episodes together in the full length novel form.
Wow. Awesome. That's really good.
What about you? Any pitches, promotions, shameless plugs?
SimpleTimesPhotography.com. That's really all I got. I don't have a big footprint, so if you're in Roanoke and you're listening, go visit our website, SimpleTimesPhotography.com, and check out our work. And if you love it, please give us a call, shoot us an email. We'd love to meet you. That's it.
Very good. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up. Jason, it was a lot of fun. As always, thank you so much for taking an hour out of your extremely busy schedule today to hang out and chat with me and whoever's watching, and maybe we'll do another one down the road sometime.
No, thank you. It was good talking to you.
All right, folks. Well, that's going to end us for today. Hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next time.